Hello everyone, it's dragonplatinum here, and welcome to the Playing Crazy Building Competition number 4. This video took a long time to make, so I appreciate all of your patience. Since I make daily content, doing big videos like this can be really stressful and time consuming, but at the same time really fun and exciting. If you would like to support my channel and see more videos like this one, I recently released merch, link in the description down below, as well as there is a join button to become a channel member. However, just simply subscribing and liking the video can help me out a ton. Anyways, there was 109 entries submitted to the competition and 10 finalists were selected. However, I only was able to reach out and record with 9 of them. Quickly before we hop in, I'll talk about my 3 marking criteria so you guys have an idea of what I'm basing my ratings off of. First up is design. This will be the overall look and style of the build, along with how nice the paint and other small details complement the build as a whole. Next up is difficulty. This is pretty similar to design, but it's all about things like block count, overall build difficulty, techniques used, and making sure it all comes together in one complete package. Lastly is handling. This will be mostly about making sure that the rocket has different functions, such as separation, landing, or deploying some sort of payload into space. Now, with all that out of the way, let's get to the rockets. First up is Gjsolo's Rockwell Star Raker. Based off a cancelled design and looking a lot more like a plane, this horizontal takeoff spacecraft definitely stood out among the competition. Design-wise, I thought it looked pretty interesting, as I had never seen this kind of spacecraft concept before. Difficulty-wise, this build sort of hugged the middle line among the competition, with only a single separation being the satellite payload, and kind of hanging out in the middle for overall block count as well. Handling-wise, Gjsolo's Star Raker was okay. There were a few mishaps that ended up in uncontrolled spins, however for the most part it did pretty well. Also, its ability to launch a satellite was really cool, even though it tended to glitch out most of the time, but I'm gonna put that on the motors being glitchy and not the build itself. Overall, for Gjsolo's final score, they received a 7 in design, a 7 in difficulty, and a 7 in handling. Next up is Cab 1234 Hebe and their Dragon Heavy. This was one of the very few rockets that didn't actually lag the server during recording, which was nice, and it also had quite a few stages, which was also pretty cool. Design-wise, I thought it was alright. There was nothing specifically over the top, but there was also nothing particularly bad either. It just felt a little middle of the road. Difficulty-wise, this build sort of hugged that middle line again when compared to the competition. The only thing I thought really deserved extra points was the fact that it had so many stages included in it. Now handling is where this one shined. It launched well, controlled well, had a ton of stages, and the payload being the Tesla Roadster was very cool. During testing, there was really no mishaps with anything, and I was really impressed. Overall, for Cab's final score, they received a 4 in design, a 6 in difficulty, and a 10 in handling. Next up is DeadAccurate's YSS 1000 Saber, a build taken straight out of Halo Reach with a whole launch site built for it. Design-wise, I thought that not just the spacecraft itself was visually impressive, but the sheer amount of detail put into the launch site was amazing. And although I don't have the time to show it all, there was also a little story I got to experience while I was on my tour. Difficulty-wise, it looked hard, hands down. It took 2 accounts to actually set up the build, and the way that the theme just flows throughout the build as a whole is just amazing. Handling is where my only small nitpick comes from. The launch site and the Saber worked well, however the staging on the Saber felt a little bit like an afterthought, as more work had to be put into the station to make it look good. Overall, for DeadAccurate's final score, they received a 10 in design, a 10 in difficulty, and a 9 in handling. Next up is TJ.EXE's build, the Space Launch System, a rocket and tower combo ready to reach the stars. Design-wise, I thought that the build looked good, especially on the actual rocket. However, I did kinda wish maybe a little more was done with the tower, but that's about it. Difficulty-wise, it looked like a relatively hard build. Making sure each of the stages worked and fit in properly was good, but again, it just felt like it was missing something to truly put it over the top in my books. However, this rocket killed it in the handling department. There were so many stages, plus a landing capsule. I was just impressed so much fit into the actual rocket. Overall, for TJ.EXE's final score, they received a 9 in design, a 9 in difficulty, and a 10 in handling. Next up is Memiom's Space Shuttle Discovery. This was probably my personal favorite build out of the bunch, as I'm a sucker for the Discovery Space Shuttle, and this one was a pretty good recreation of it. However, as I get farther through these builds, I had to get a lot more critical and take points off a lot easier. Design-wise, I thought that the build was really cool, and were it not for the other things I saw in the competition, it would have scored much higher. However, I did feel that the thrusters needed a little more bulk to them, and I would have really liked to see some towers to complement the whole build. Difficulty-wise, it looked like a really challenging build. The folding was impressive, and this is definitely something I could not recreate with my current skills. For handling, there really isn't much for me to say other than it was good, and the staging was overall pretty solid. Overall, for Memiom's final score, they received a 8 in design, a 9 in difficulty, and a 9 in handling. Next up is Razorfish Crazy 515's DPSC Corkscrew. This was a nice, creative breath of fresh air from the competition, and I thought it was a pretty cool concept and the definition of just a really solid overall build. Design-wise, I thought that the build looked cool, and the spinning parts were definitely a big part of that. I was also glad to see the use of lights, as I personally feel it's super underutilized in big builds. Difficulty-wise, it looked like a decently hard build, but not on the same scale of some of the builds it ran up against in this competition. Handling-wise, I was actually pleasantly surprised at how speedy and how many stages made up the build. It was just pretty solid in this category. Overall, for Razor's final score, they received a 7 in design, a 6 in difficulty, and an 8 in handling. Next up is Nightchaser 1's Space Shuttle Discovery, the second Discovery shuttle in the competition. And I think this is also the first time I've actually had two of the same builds make it to the final video. Design-wise, this was the first time I could directly compare two builds as well, and this build turned out a little rougher around the edges than the other. I felt there were a few areas, especially around the external fuel tank, that could have received a bit more polishing to make them appear smoother and rounder. Difficulty-wise, I am still impressed by the folding, and really it's about as difficult as the last one. For handling, there wasn't too much for me to say, as during testing there was quite a bit of lag, so it was hard to tell how well it handled overall. But I'm pretty confident in saying it was alright. Overall, for Nightchaser 1's final score, they received a 6 in design, an 8 in difficulty, and a 7 in handling. Next up is CookieMaking Machine's N1 Moon Rocket. This was the smallest rocket in the competition with just under 3,000 total blocks. Design-wise, this build was alright. I liked how the panels on the sides of the rocket were able to fold out. However, I felt that there wasn't too much detail in the overall rocket, and that if it had been built bigger, more could have been done with it. Difficulty-wise, this one was relatively simple compared to the competition. It really had no parts that stood out as terribly hard to make other than those cool side panels. For handling, there wasn't too much for me to say either. It flew fine and had a few stages, so it was alright. Overall, for CookieMaking Machine's final score, they received a 3 in design, a 3 in difficulty, and a 5 in handling. Last but not least is Miner 4271's Energia Baron launch vehicle. This was the largest and highest voted build in the competition. Design-wise, this build was spectacular. Not only did it take 3 accounts to set up, but each part felt important. The towers didn't feel like an afterthought and were just as detailed as the spacecraft itself, and even had many moving parts to go along with the launch sequence. Difficulty-wise, this looked extremely hard. Things like making sure the towers and the rocket lined up could not have been easy. Pair that with the multiple thrusters on the rocket that look like they belong, and all the small fine details that were added, it's crazy. For handling, once again, I was blown away. Although the build was obviously very laggy since it was over 30,000 blocks, the shuttle handled fine. The stages worked beautifully, and there was really nothing on it that I could say didn't work right. Overall, for Miner 4271's final score, they received a 10 in design, a 10 in difficulty, and a 10 in handling. This is the second perfect score I have ever given out for a competition, and this build deserves it. Before we get to the winners, I would like to thank the people who submitted their builds to this competition. It was a lot of submissions and a lot of really cool builds that had to fight for spots. To everyone who made it to the finals, thank you for coming out to these recording sessions and making this video possible. I know it took a while, but I couldn't have done it without your help. If you didn't make it to the finals, or top 3 this time, there will always be another competition in the future. For this competition, however, coming up with top 3 was insanely hard. I had to break things down into minor details and be hypercritical about just about everything. Even now, as I go to announce the winners, I still think that there were other builds that could have easily taken a spot if not for small things. Anyways, without further ado, let me present to you your 3 winners. In third place, with a score of 28, was TJ.EXE with the Space Launch System. In second place is DeadAccurate and the YSS 1000 Sabre with a score of 29. And in first place, with a perfect score of 30, we have Miner 4271 with the Energia Baron launch vehicle. And there we go, guys. That's all I've got for this competition. Hope you all enjoyed this video. To the competitors, I hope you enjoyed competing. It was really hard scoring, you guys. And although I do plan on doing another competition in the future, I'm going to take a longer break from these major competitions and let myself rest. These videos require a lot of behind the scenes stuff that you never get to see, and it's a lot of work for one person. But with that out of the way, that's really all I've got for this video, guys. So thanks a lot for watching this video, and always, if you guys like this video, feel free to give it a like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, guys, it's dragonplatinum, signing out. Peace out, guys. Bye.